Hello and welcome to Careers Beyond Academia, hosted by the Stem Cell Network and Medicine by Design. I am Sonam Dubey and I'm with Medicine by Design. One of the goals of this series is to expose trainees to as many different job roles that might be available to them once they get their degree in life sciences. And it's also for them to help understand the qualifications they might need to get into these roles. So Stem Cell Network and Medicine by Design have teamed up to host this series, which highlights a wide variety of careers that will become available to graduates like yourself. And we also have these this event on a monthly basis, in addition to some other trainee events that are accessible to you. So feel free to check out our websites and see what you can utilize to further understand your career options, as well as your the educational tools you might need to do that. Don't forget, we also have newsletters that you can sign up for, as well as emails regarding the different events that we host. A few housekeeping notes here. So the sessions will be recorded. So the recording will be beginning shortly. And each of the speakers will have 10 to 12 minutes to speak. And we will reserve the Q&A to the end of the two speakers once they have spoken. So if you would like, you can pop in your questions in the Q&A box, and we will take those up once we get to the Q&A portion. The Q&A portion will not be recorded, so if you would like to come online and ask the question virtually in person, feel free to do so. Just flag it to us and we can get you online. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Francis Jeanson. So Francis is the head of the Center for Analytics at the Ontario Brain Institute, where he is helping to advance skills, technologies, and translation of neuroanalytics into care. Over the past decade, he's engaged and published with collaborators on numerous projects aimed at facilitating the sharing and integration of health data, as well as in analytics areas such as health risk modeling. Welcome, Francis. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sonam. Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you, Sonam and Gustavo, for the invitation. It's really, I think, an interesting opportunity to sort of share, a bit of our career, my career path, and our colleague's career path, Brendan, who will be speaking after me. Which is always an interesting question to ask yourself: is your career path something that is something that others can replicate, or is it something that's really straightforward? And to be honest, I think, as you'll see, it's really something that's I think unique to some extent to everybody. But I do hope that there will be nuggets in this presentation that will help individuals and this, everybody who's attending this event to think about and maybe help consider other options or adjust some of their thinking, even as to what they're expecting in terms of developing their career in the life sciences and in our case, and my case, the informatics space for health research. So I'll start now. As Sonam mentioned, I'm the head of the Center for Analytics at the Ontario Brain Institute. I oversee essentially the informatics activities that we have at the Institute, which spans items related to supporting the data collection and harmonization for research data in neuroscience. That spans essentially multiple institutions across Ontario, as well as Canada and even beyond. And we have a centralized platform called BrainCode that helps researchers collect the variety and diversity of the data that they have through research studies that they conduct, so that they can make use of those data, collaborate with their colleagues, but also the platform itself enables sharing with third parties, which is a really unique and important feature. On top of that, we have a Center for Analytics that is now just up and started and enabling the community of not only researchers in academia, but also industry to leverage advanced computing, leverage data, and develop more advanced models to help better understand brain disorders and develop new technologies that can actually help with either diagnosis, prediction, and potentially even treatment. So I did a PhD in cognitive science and completed that at Carleton University in 2014. And I'll share my next slide, which shows you a little bit of that jaggedy path, so to speak. Nothing straightforward, as I mentioned, but really a path that started, I think, at least for me in high school, just considering the things that I was really passionate about. And in high school at the time, I was doing both some computer science on my own time, working with computers, software, getting interested in how they worked, but also in physics. I was passionate about physics as one of the courses that a standard course that we had in high school, and really realized, my growing passion for the sciences. And as I reached the point of going to university, I realized, I'm interested in these computers that could potentially help us actually even better understand physics. And so that's where the interest for how do computers think, how could they potentially solve problems that we can't solve really came about. And so, in those early days, I was already exploring the web had just come out. It was really the boom of the web in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so I had started to dabble in working on websites and actually worked on some contracts as a web developer already. And in parallel, realized I had this real passion for understanding intelligence, understanding how we could build machines that could help us do more things. So I joined the terrific program at the University of Toronto in cognitive science and AI in 2001, and did that until 2006, essentially. Initially as sort of part-time, and then went full-time. Completed that in 2006 with the honors bachelor's in science and cog sci and AI. So really a great program, and continued to explore opportunities. And I worked along the way, always sort of honing my skills in software, et cetera. And I worked also with some companies in between my honors and bachelor's and my master's. So you'll see here, I did a master's in the UK at the University of Sussex in evolution and adaptive systems from 2007 to 2008. But in the meantime, I was also working with some companies on contracts and developing web applications. So really honing those software skills. This also happened after my master's. After completing this master's, looking at it was really fascinating master's. We're looking at artificial life, evolutionary algorithms, neural networks, and understanding how animals, animal intelligence and human intelligence, and really decided to continue investigating that area of science. And so I pursued that PhD in cognitive science at Carleton, as I mentioned, from 2009 to 2013, with a defense in 2014. So that was, and as I mentioned, I was really passionate about this. Those software skills really helped because I worked primarily in sort of the simulation of neural networks during my PhD, and really honed my skills in not only software development, but also the analysis of those data that we were generating from those simulations. And so that was really something that I think was beneficial in my grasp, building that technical skill set. But I should say that having those parallel little arrows like I have here in software, working with companies, working on contracts, that helped me hone my professional software development skills and understanding of the professional context of creating applications that are a product, that are a tool that are used by real customers in the real world, with all the constraints that comes with, including the uptime requirements to make sure that those systems are up and running, ensuring that you can also manage large influx of users. So you have to be able to scale the systems up and make sure that they're resilient to that, creating backups in case things go wrong, and understanding also sort of the governance that goes around documenting and making sure that there's proper management of those applications over time. After completing my PhD, I discovered, and this is the critical point with I think a lot of folks who go through an academic path, is thinking about what do you want to do after academia. And I had I was considering options around staying in academia, looked at a few labs that might be of interest, but I also had this sort of, itch, so to speak, of wanting to get into the industry and apply my skills that I had gained from my research, as well as my previous professional skills in software development, to something that could have real impact. And this is where I joined actually OBI in the early days, from 2013 to 2017, the end of 2016, as with the neuroinformatics team. And so the team was just in the early stages of building BrainCode platform. And I was initially a program lead, enabling coordinating and ensuring that we were building the platform according to the right specifications, and supporting the users, et cetera, and then became manager near the end of that timeline. At the same time, I had started to interact with a number of my friends and future colleagues around, should we potentially create some technologies in the space of data and data discovery, data analytics. And so I decided to sort of launch myself and get into the startup world, to co-found a company with some friends, and essentially create new technologies that we attempted to commercialize, and went through the number of arduous steps of really wrapping your head around everything you really need to know to build a company, which not only includes the technology, but also the legal aspect of things, your incorporation, your partnerships, like the agreements with folks that you want to hire on board, everything around also marketing and how do you get yourself out there. So a tremendous amount of learning and experience from doing that. We went through a few stages of innovation and acceleration with the Founders Institute and the Creative Destruction Lab. That was a really terrific set of experiences. And eventually realized that we didn't quite have the right solution at the time for the right type of public. And so we decided to wind things down and focus more on consulting, which I continue to do, which is the next sort of arrow up here, around consulting from 2017 to 2021. At which point OBI asked me to help them with their strategy to develop the Center for Analytics. And so as of 2023, I've now joined OBI again to help them launch the Center for Analytics. So this is my roundabout way of getting to where I am today, and we'll welcome questions later. I'll move fairly quickly over these next few slides, but just to give you a snapshot and a bit of my background. So I have a honors bachelor's of science, master's, PhD. I think the potential salary range, this is really hard, and this totally evolves. But the 100K to 200K is roughly where we'd be at, I guess, in this kind of space, and sort of the management level of informatics and analytics in the research space. And it does depend on whether you're really a hard, big, large industry teams, or if you're more academic, those salaries will change. But this gives you a high level of idea of what that range would be. In a sentence, I essentially help with the strategy and operationalization of this technology, and the teams to support informatics, analytics, AI, and tech translation, which is a really exciting area to me. It's important to have good skills for listening, as well as strong technical background. And this is, I think, where my software experience was really helpful. Good presentation skills, really important. You always have to pitch yourself. And that's true whether you're doing it in front of an audience like today. And I'm not saying I'm an expert at it, but you sort of get more comfortable doing it. But you also need to be able to present and pitch to individuals when you're looking for a new job, when you have a new idea that you want to try to convince maybe an investor or a potential collaborator or co-founder. You need to be able to have good presentation skills. In my area, having an innovation sort of driven approach to things is really key, because we are living in a space that evolves really quickly. And being grounded in reality is also important. You don't want to be so much in the clouds that you are just thinking about the future without thinking of how do you implement that today. Other career areas that I did explore, are robotics. I was keen in robotics and worked in robotics in my undergrad and a little bit during my master's. And I was thinking of continuing that, but it was just one area that I was interested in, but worked a lot more on the algorithmic side and software side. So that wasn't quite the direction I took. Film production, I'm also a big film buff and worked on a number of sort of short films over the years, but never something that I really considered completely moving into. And the academic, as I mentioned, which is also something that is for sure something I was thinking about. I'll move a little bit more quickly here, but we have some of the typical activities in terms of my day-to-day work, is building and operationalizing the projects that support data, software, governance, analytics with the team. So it's working closely with the team that have specific duties and tasks and making sure that we can operationalize what we envision. So having that strategy, building up the plan for that strategy, then operationalizing it is really key. So we support platform users and their own projects on a day-to-day. Like I mentioned, we strategize future direction and make sure to listen to the users, the end users, so that we don't just build something that we think people will come and use. We build something that really we know will have an impact and a benefit. I participate in a number of committees and other organizations that to support them. So, for example, the Centennial College, I'm part of their AI advisory group for their program there. I was also with Durham College previously, and I also participate in committees like with Compute Ontario, for example, and in supporting their technology leadership committee. I also work quite a bit in the standard setting space for data and data sharing analytics. So participating in the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health and the International Neuroinformatics Coordinating Facility, the INCF. And so, and conducting informatics and research on a day-to-day basis, or that's, I wouldn't say the primary occupation of my role, but every few days I'll dedicate a bit of time in advancing my own knowledge and doing some research in the space. So I think my role is important because I help ensure researchers and companies have access to data and analytics, which we ultimately want to benefit for impact in patients' health. I think having I like my role in the sense that we're always thinking sort of in a forward-thinking way, where we have this need to continuously adapt and think about how do we innovate and improve not only on the operational side of things, but also the overall sort of programs that we're intending to implement from a data analytics perspective. So that's really important to me. Challenges. Well, so like I mentioned, innovation requires change management, and change management is very hard, as you know. I think as individuals, as humans, we like to continue. We create habits. We're habit forming creatures, you could say, and it's a natural thing. It's actually a good thing because it creates efficiency and more organization. But sometimes those efficiencies, you reach a bottleneck. You reach a point where you need to really break that mold and move to something new. And so that's where change management is needed, and working on change management can be really hard. And so future career trajectories, I mean, of course, you could grow in this role and move to becoming vice president or more of an executive role over time. That's always a trajectory that some would like to take in some cases. But also, I think for me is really about being able to interact with the broader sort of community and continue that role of mentorship, but also I think as a student, right, and learn from others as you move along. So quickly, career planning advice I was asked to share. So ideally, you want to predict the future, right? You'd like to know what is the area that you want to, you will be, satisfied with, feeling fulfilled with, and where you can have an impact. I think that's ideal. But in reality, right now, I think some quick tips for what you can do is, learn learn skills and technical skills, especially on your own time. Don't rely just on the courses that you take. Do really take the time to work on those technical skills, because they are technical and they do require practice and a lot of it. Get additional diplomas and certifications in the area that you're interested in growing in. That's always beneficial and it's always recognized by potential employers. Engage with the community, meetups, hackathons, side projects, conferences. Do a lot of those, and I think that's an important piece around even creating your network, right? Your connection to other folks who are doing potentially great projects that you could participate in. Build your social profile. I think LinkedIn in particular is a really good platform for that. It's a good way to put yourself out there and also see what others are doing and connect with them. Engage with others and find mentors. Finding a good mentor is easier said than done. Really, it's about finding, clicking well with somebody else that can really understand where you're trying to go or would like to go, and they can help you, foster that direction. But I think that's great when you can find somebody that can help you with that, and learn how to present in front of an audience. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. It's really good to have good presentation skills. So just finishing off on a few additional tips. Keep learning new technologies. It's a world that moves fast. So if you're in the tech space, health space, technology is everywhere, and so we want to stay on top of that. So a lot of resources online, of course, research papers, if you're comfortable with academic research, are always also a good source. But also a lot of science journals and articles that I think are worth following. Participate in the community, as I mentioned. Make those connections, really important. And last but not least, have good work-life balance. It's important to not burn out. You can be sometimes overly ambitious and then forget that you also have a personal life to foster and to grow. And if you're stressed, this is a quick tip. Learn to sort of step back and relativize, so to speak, the situation. Don't. It's something that comes, I think, with time, and you learn to create these muscle memories, so to speak, of how to deal with situations that are sometimes stressful. So that's it. I'll stop there. I hope that was a little bit helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Francis. Lots of great tips in there. And as mentioned earlier, we will reserve the questions to the end. So I would like to now invite our next speaker, Brendan Behan. Brendan is the Director of Data Strategy and Partnerships at the Vector Institute, where he leads the evolution of Vector's data strategy and data governance program, as well as supporting data partnerships. Brendan has also been involved in national informatics initiatives to support wider data sharing, such as the Canadian Open Neuroscience Platform. So welcome, Brendan.
Hey, thank you so much. I'll share my screen. Okay, so I think you should be able to see my screen okay. So thank you again for inviting me to present today. Like Francis, I'll be talking through my career to date and hope it helps others in their thinking of careers outside of academia. So briefly, my current position is Director of Data Strategy and Partnerships with the Vector Institute. This is an independent, not-for-profit corporation dedicated to AI research based here in Toronto. In terms of my degrees and credentials, I hold a Bachelor of Natural Sciences degree with a focus on neuroscience from Trinity College Dublin, Ireland. I then also completed a PhD in neuroimaging at the same university. And in recent years, I went back to school to complete a certificate in data analytics, big data, and predictive analytics from the Toronto Metropolitan University. So in terms of my career line, I'm going to start with my PhD work back in Dublin. So my PhD work was primarily focused on the use of functional MRI to assess impulsive traits as it relates to drug dependency. So I always had an interest in neuroscience, neuropharmacology, as well as coding and neuroanatomy. So it was a nice combination of those different interests into one program. I then graduated back in 2013 and came to Canada for a postdoctoral fellowship through the MyTax Accelerate program, whereby they were both a private sponsor and also a public body who oversaw my postdoctoral work. I was based at the University Health Network here in Toronto, and my activities focused on the use of structural MRI to better visualize how certain tumors around the brainstem were compressing white matter fibers. So during my postdoc, I was considering options of next steps as I was being exposed to industry partners through that postdoctoral work. I knew I liked being involved in neuroscience research. I enjoyed project management, but I also knew I didn't want to become a principal investigator. So I began exploring opportunities. And then back in 2016, I joined the Ontario Brain Institute as a program lead overseeing the development of the BrainCode platform, which, as Francis mentioned, is a neuroscience data sharing platform. I was interested in the role because it kind of married my interest of neuroscience and project management. And also during my PhD work back in Dublin, I had worked with a European initiative called Imogen, which had collected data across several European sites. So I was familiar with the struggles and challenges, but also successes of large-scale data collection. So that's why I joined OBI back in 2016. 2 years later, I then progressed to be the overall manager of informatics and analytics at OBI, where I oversaw the development and operations of the platform, related governance and partnerships, as well as managed the team at OBI as well. And during that time, I was there for roughly 8 years altogether. I saw a lot of growth related to projects employing machine learning and artificial intelligence in their analysis pipelines. And it's around this time I also went back to Toronto Metropolitan University to get a certificate in that sort of analysis area, because I wanted to better improve my understanding and knowledge of those techniques. And then earlier this year, this opportunity opened up at Vector, where they were looking for someone to lead out their data strategy and partnerships. And I applied and moved to Vector back in May this year to help them with their various activities tied to machine learning and AI activities. So that's my career timeline in a nutshell. Moving on to the current role and a quick summary of its various attributes. So for director roles like this, in terms of typical background, education level, and area, I tend to see mostly masters and PhDs holding these positions, but just to say that's a common feature. It's not a necessity, but it is a common thing I've noticed from working in this area. Salary range is always hard to, put down numbers, but for director roles like this at not-for-profits, it typically starts about $120,000, but also don't forget the benefits packages, retirement contributions, etc. But that's roughly a starting figure I've seen for not-for-profits and director roles of this nature. What I do in a sentence, so I oversee data strategy for Vector, as well as oversee the development of different governance policies and frameworks. I also, with the team, manage various partnerships in the biosciences space. In terms of key skills, because we have various projects ongoing across data governance, various machine learning projects, it's important to have good skills in terms of managing the team and overall projects within our portfolio. So being able to delegate activities to team members is important. Being able to communicate expectations to team members, but also communicate updates, challenges, solutions to both your higher ups in the organization as well as external stakeholders is important as well. Strategy is a key feature of what I do in terms of kind of building out where we're going to be in the next 3 to 5 years in the data space. So as per Francis, it's kind of trying to predict the future in a sense. And once we have a strategy in place, then we move on to things like operationalization of that strategy, planning, what's the plan for the next fiscal, etc. And also tied to that, critical thinking skills, but how we assess certain scenarios and how we deal with challenges and issues that might come up during a certain project or during a certain data governance conversation. Other careers I considered were in a few different areas. I looked at potential roles in pharmaceuticals, for example, the role of clinical trials manager or medical science liaison officer, partly because I enjoyed, managing projects in the biosciences space, as well as the underlying science itself and communicating that to different folks. I also considered consulting as well, primarily because I was interested in the aspect of problem solving. I'm a big Sudoku crossword kind of person, so I do enjoy trying to solve problems with team members for particular projects. Finally, I also considered medical school for a bit, especially when I was finishing undergraduate, but ultimately decided I didn't want to go down that path, partly because I didn't want to be interacting directly with the general public day to day. So instead I kind of focused on the Stata Biosciences pathway. And as mentioned previously, I did pursue a postdoctoral fellowship initially. So I was considering academia, but then decided to also pivot course or change course based on my interests and overall career goals. I'll go on to the next slide. So in terms of typical activities, and this is kind of just representing day-to-day work on my side, I do a lot of work in terms of liaising with my team members on various projects. So we have daily huddles in the morning, weekly extensive team meetings, and the liaising can be about just discussing next steps in the project, how to follow up on a certain action item, if we've encountered a challenge, how to discuss possible solutions. So that's a major focus of my role currently. I also meet regularly with internal teams and external partners to review and discuss different updates on various projects. So that's also a key feature of what I do at the moment. Project management is also a critical aspect of what we do. We try to have plans on an annual basis with activities split up on a quarterly basis as well. So we plan our team activities for the year. We then have quarterly check-ins and then pivot or update our annual plans based on new projects that came along, or for some reason, maybe a project has stalled. So you need to be somewhat flexible or agile in this work as well. And finally, a major part of my role currently is reviewing and supporting the drafting of various documents and policies, particularly on the data governance side. This can range from everything, including policies and procedures, data governance frameworks, data transfer agreements, collaboration agreements. So in my current role, there's a lot of focus on not only the actual development of data governance framework materials, but also their operations and execution of those documents as well. Moving on to the next slide. So highlights opportunities and challenges. So why my role is important. So if you think about an organization where they have key strategic objectives, ensuring you have a clear framework about how you want to leverage data assets is important. So data strategy is key, oftentimes, to an organization meeting their overall strategic objectives. And tied to data strategies, making sure you have clear governance around access, archiving, various aspects of data management. And for organizations to meet their strategic objectives, it often entails partnerships with external organizations. So you think about who do you want to partner with externally, for what reason, what kind of criteria would dictate a go or no-go decision on a partnership moving forward. So that's why my role is important to the organization as a whole. Why I enjoy my role? I enjoy my role partly because it's a nice situation to be in, whereby you kind of have ideas of analysis projects or ideas around how you want to frame a data governance policy. You then work with a team on implementing it, and then you actually bring that idea to fruition. There's an end product or something to point to, which is a really nice aspect of it. And given my role, I work on a bunch of different interesting projects across different biosciences partners, and that variety in different projects I work on makes every day very interesting, and that's why I like what I do currently. Challenges linked to my role. I think this is a common enough feature across similar organizations, but being able to manage multiple projects in parallel is a very important task we have to learn. Just due to the nature of how these organizations function, you oftentimes have to reprioritize various partnerships or various governance, policy, document development plans on an ongoing basis. So you need to be flexible and agile in your approach with the team due to competing priorities. In terms of future career trajectory opportunities for roles like this, one example is a chief data officer role. This is a senior executive responsible for the utilization and governance of data across an organization. And this is quite an extensive role that also covers aspects of data management and analysis, but also things like privacy of data, cybersecurity, and overall governance considerations. But that's just one example. As per Francis, there's also other similar VP exec roles within data governance, analytics, AI, ML usage, which also could be accessible in the future from this role. So then I think this is the final slide I have regarding career planning advice. So again, I think I'm pretty similar to Francis in my wording here, but a few things to note that I'd recommend to others is number one, take advantage of networking opportunities. So one example here is the Science to Business Network. When I was a postdoc at UHN, I attended some of their events for networking purposes, but also they ran really good workshops. I remember they ran a workshop where we learned how to craft resumes and cover letters for applying for positions outside of academia. So this is one group I would definitely advise people to look into, as I think they now have mentorship programs, they have annual meetings. So from my experience, they're really good to attend when I was doing my postdoc. Secondly, taking relevant courses and training is important. So again, when I was doing my postdoc, because I was funded through the MyTax group, I was able to access training courses on project management, which was very useful. And in parallel, I also joined Toastmasters to improve my public speaking skills, which is an important aspect to build along in your career, because as you go on, you get more and more, you get expectations of being able to present to different groups, and you also have to learn how to change your story or materials depending on the target audience. So I found Toastmasters very beneficial in that regard. Thirdly, reaching out for informal coffee chats is important. I often meet with different trainees every couple of months for a coffee chat here in Toronto. The one thing I would say, though, is if you're going to reach out for an informal coffee chat, make sure you do the research beforehand and come in prepared with specific questions about how the organization functions or roles available. It just shows you have interest in the actual organization and your potential future career path tied to that. Finally, my recommendation would be apply with tailored cover letters and resumes. So during my time at OBI, I was on an interview panel for several positions over the years, and going through different resumes and cover letters, it was always received well when you had a clear cover letter and resume explaining why you were applying and how your experiences and skill sets would help you perform the role at hand. You'd be surprised by how many people apply with generic cover letters or resumes. So if your cover letter includes the name of the position, the organization, and can explain how your experiences can meet the requirements of that role, you're going to be ahead of a lot of people in my experience. So that's a key thing to also factor in when you're applying for positions as well. And I think that's it in terms of my slides for today. The one last thing I would add is just to echo the point that Francis made. Work-life balance is key. And I think as you go further in your career, you kind of learn the importance of having a clear divide between what you do during working hours and having a life outside of it. So make sure when you're kind of pursuing career options, you're not sacrificing time for your own interests, family, friends, etc. It's important to keep that balance as you go along in your career journey. And yes, I think that's my final slide. So I'll pass it back to Sonam.
Thank you so much, Brendan. And thank you to both of our speakers, actually, on behalf of Stem Cell Network and Medicine by Design, for those fantastic talks.